In 1657, Swedish King Charles X was stuck in conflicts with Poland and Russia. King Frederick III of Denmark saw a chance for a successful war against his northern rival. He could hardly have imagined what would happen next. That autumn, the Swedish army marched back through Germany and into Jutland. Then came one of Denmark's coldest winters of the century, and that gave the Swedes an extraordinary opportunity. When it grew so cold that the sea around Jutland froze, the Swedes marched over the ice with horses and cannons, first to the island of Funen and then to Zealand, where the capital, Copenhagen, lay defenceless before them. In the Treaty of Roskilde in 1658, Sweden forced Denmark to give up huge territories, including Skåne. In the meantime, the Danish population was devastated by the war, the weather, poor harvests, and outbreaks of disease. In 1660, King Frederick called a meeting of Denmark's estates to address the crisis. In an extraordinary turn of events, the burghers and clergy turned on the aristocrats in the Diet and gave power to an absolute and hereditary monarchy. Without the Little Ice Age, Sweden's stunning victory would have been improbable, and without Sweden's victory, Danish politics might not have taken its sudden turn to absolutism. And just how different would history have been then? Should we really say that weather or the Little Ice Age caused the Swedish victory or the rise of absolutism in Denmark? In this lesson, we'll examine the role of the Little Ice Age in the political and social history of the Nordic countries. We'll consider what roles climate did or didn't play in some major episodes in early modern history. There are many major events and developments we might expect to find in any textbook of late medieval and early modern Nordic history. The formation of the Kalmar Union between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden starting in 1397, and its breakup in the 1400s and 1500s. The lives of Scandinavia's kings and queens. The rise and fall of Sweden's empire around the Baltic. Wars with Russia, including the Great Northern War of 1700 to 1721. The dissolution of the union between Norway and Denmark. Struggles between monarchs and aristocrats and among political factions for control of land and power. And the many conflicts between Sweden and Denmark throughout these centuries. Standard histories of the Nordic countries in this period will also discuss important social and cultural developments, such as the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, the growth of commerce, towns, and cities, Nordic colonies, migration, and overseas trade, the rise of literacy and the Enlightenment, and social conflicts such as witchcraft prosecutions. Until recently, textbooks and standard histories rarely, if ever, mentioned the Little Ice Age when describing events and developments like these. This reflects a long tradition in history that focused on politics and leaders and usually ignored the natural world. In recent decades, however, historians have also become interested in a wider range of historical figures and factors in history, including environmental forces such as disease and the climate. Some have teamed up with scientists in interdisciplinary studies of the past. For Europe as a whole, historians have examined possible roles for the Little Ice Age during times of crisis. During the 1590s and the first decade of the 1600s, many parts of Europe experienced extreme weather, failed harvests, famine, and outbreaks of disease. For some states, this crisis of the 1590s meant political disasters, including a major rebellion in today's Turkey, as well as Russia's time of troubles, marked by political chaos, violence, and famine. The mid-1600s brought on a so-called general crisis, including the 30 Years' War, civil wars in France, Spain, and the United Kingdom, and many more conflicts in Europe and beyond. Exceptionally cold winters and droughts also plagued Europe's first settlements in North America, carrying off many of the first colonists and colonies. Historian Geoffrey Parker has shown how extreme weather related to volcanic eruptions may have triggered many of these disasters, and how fatal synergy of terrible weather and warfare saw the loss of millions of lives. His history also explores the enduring effects of the Little Ice Age and the general crisis on Europe's culture and politics. These crises had echoes in Nordic history too. As early as 1955, Swedish historian Gustav Öterström noted the deadly combination of bad weather and continuous warfare on Sweden and Denmark's populations, starting in the 1590s. The destruction of the Great Northern War is also a good example of Parker's fatal synergy concept. Europe's exceptionally cold winter of 1708 to 1709 devastated Swedish King Charles XII's army during its campaign against the Russian Empire. The following years saw high prices, hunger, and outbreaks of human and animal diseases around the Baltic. Finland lost a large part of its population to violence and plague during Russia's invasion of the 1710s, known as the Great Wrath. Scholars have also begun to explore the impacts of the Little Ice Age on Nordic cultures. This includes studies on the influence of weather on witchcraft prosecutions. Tens of thousands of people across Europe during the 1500s and 1600s were executed for supposedly using magic or working with the devil. This scapegoating usually targeted women and marginalized communities or individuals, although, curiously, in Finland and Iceland, most of the supposed witches were men. As in some other parts of Europe, witchcraft prosecutions in the Nordic countries often followed poor harvests and storms, and some alleged witches were accused of weather magic. Does this mean that the Little Ice Age caused conflicts, crises, or for that matter, witchcraft prosecution in the Nordic countries? In fact, scholars are often reluctant to use words like cause when discussing climate and history for several reasons. First, it's important to avoid simple climate determinism, the idea that climate alone can offer a simple explanation for complicated episodes in history. Second, we have to be careful in explaining which distinctions about the past climate made important differences in Nordic history. For example, it wasn't just the Little Ice Age that caused famines and witch hunts in the early modern Nordic countries. What we mean is that the timing and severity of the cold spells during the Little Ice Age help explain when and where the famines happened and why they were so many and so terrible. The timing and severity of the cold spells during the Little Ice Age also helps explain why witch hunts peaked in the late 1500s and 1600s, and why many witch trials focused on accusations of weather magic. Finally, when thinking about climate as a force in history, we also have to consider how people responded. Did rulers, communities, and individuals make good or bad choices? Were their economies, states, and institutions strong and resilient, or weak and fragile? This simple model can help us understand how the effects of climate on history depend on those cultural responses, because it shows The most direct impacts of extreme weather and hazards were usually biophysical. They affected food production, physical infrastructure like buildings, and people's health. Then, these biophysical impacts could have socioeconomic effects, influencing prices and employment and populations' birth rates and death rates and migration. And then these socioeconomic effects could, in turn, produce political effects, including revolution and conflict. Sometimes disasters in the Little Ice Age set off feedback loops among these effects, leading to major crises. However, these cascading effects from one type of impact to another were mediated through cultural responses, good decision-making, and resilient political, economic, and cultural institutions could prevent disasters from spiraling into crises. In our next lesson, then, we'll look at the different ways that Nordic societies responded to the challenges of the Little Ice Age and how they eventually came to escape its worst effects.